Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm 29. Until 6 months ago, I was just the guy who fixed Wi Fi in a building where my rent was more than most people's car payments. Then, one night at midnight, I knocked on apartment 14B and she opened the door like she'd been waiting for me. The hallway smelled like citrus and rain, and when I said, I fixed her Wi Fi, she looked me right in the eyes and whispered, You deserve more than just a tip. What she did next changed everything. She kept finding quiet, careful ways to see me again, each one riskier than the last, until a porch light became our secret code, and I realized some boundaries hurt more than they protect. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I lived in a one-room studio above the parking garage of the Riverside condominiums, where the monthly rent was more than most people made in 2 weeks. The only reason I could afford it was because I fixed things. Routers, thermostats, printers that jammed at midnight when someone needed boarding passes. The building super, Noah, threw me work when residents didn't want to wait for official maintenance. That's how I ended up outside apartment 14B at 5 minutes to midnight on a Friday, holding a spare router and listening to the elevator ding 2 floors down. The hallway smelled like citrus cleaner and rain from the Riverwalk. I checked Noah's text again. 14B again, router dropping. She's having trouble with her gallery thing. I knocked twice, soft enough not to wake neighbors. The door opened before my hand dropped. She stood there in a cream cardigan that probably cost more than my rent, dark hair pulled back, no makeup, still beautiful in that careful way rich women managed even at midnight. Madeline Harrow. I'd fixed her internet twice before, but she'd never opened the door this fast. Ethan, she said, like she'd been expecting me. I didn't remember telling her my name. Ms. Harrow. I held up the rotor. Noah said you're having connection issues. She stepped back to let me in. As I crossed the threshold, I noticed the porch light outside her door click twice, then go dark. It's the strangest thing, she said, closing the door behind me. It works perfectly during the day, but after 11? Her voice trailed off. From somewhere in the apartment, I heard Graham Harrow's voice echoing from a speakerphone. Something about quarterly projections and a flight delay. I followed her to the kitchen, where the router sat behind a potted fern on the marble counter. The apartment was immaculate, art on every wall, books arranged by color, throw pillows that had never been thrown. It just stops, she said, hovering with a ceramic mug while I knelt beside the counter. The router was warm to the touch. I unplugged it, counted 10 seconds, plugged it back in. The lights blinked green, orange, green again. Could be overheating, I said, moving the fern aside. These units run hot when they're tucked away like this. She leaned closer to watch me work. Her perfume was subtle, expensive, something with vanilla and cedar. You're very patient, she said. I tested the connection speed on her laptop. Full bars, no dropped packets. Looks good now, just needs room to breathe. That's when I said it. The line that would replay in my head for weeks. I fixed her Wi-Fi, I said, more to myself than to her. Now what? She set down her mug and looked at me directly for the first time. You deserve more than just a tip. I started to object. Noah handled all the payments. Residents weren't supposed to tip individual workers. But she was already moving toward the refrigerator. She pulled a small framed card from under a magnet shaped like a paintbrush. It's an artist preview pass, she said, offering it to me. Tomorrow night at the Riverfront Gallery, for donors and consultants. The card was heavy, printed on real paper, gold lettering. I can't, it's not payment, she said quickly. It's, you could meet clients. People need tech help for their businesses. Graham's voice grew louder from the speaker. Something about landing in Chicago, taking the red eye home, Sunday. She glanced toward the living room, then back at me, mouthed the word, please. I took the card. thank you, I said. She walked me to the door. As I stepped into the hallway, the porch light blinked once, stayed dark for 2 seconds, then came back on. Good night, Ethan, she said. The elevator bell dinged 2 floors away. She was still standing in the doorway when the doors opened. I walked across the rain-slick parking lot to my studio, where the rent notice was still taped to my door and half a sandwich sat wrapped in foil on my desk. The place smelled like soldering flux and instant coffee, 3 plastic bins full of spare cables and circuit boards, a mattress on a frame I'd built from 2x4s. I texted Noah, 14B is fine now. He replied immediately, she's nice, just lonely. I hung the artist pass on a thumbtack beside my workbench, intending to return it the next day. But that night, I lay awake, listening to cars on the wet street and thinking about the way she'd mouthed please when her husband's voice filled the room. Saturday morning, I fixed a printer in 6C and a thermostat in 9A. 2 cash tips I didn't want but needed. Mrs. Klein caught me in the lobby afterward, all silver hair and bright lipstick. You're so handy, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. But you know the HOA rules about staff at resident events, don't you? I'm not staff, I said. Just a contractor. Of course. Her smile was sharp as her nail polish. Still, best to keep boundaries clear. I looked at the gallery pass in my toolkit and nodded. But at 6 that evening, I found myself walking into the riverfront gallery anyway. Not to attend the event, just to return the pass and explain that. I couldn't use it. The space was all white walls and track lighting, filled with the kind of people who wore scarves indoors and talked with their hands. I spotted Madeline near the coat check, wearing a black dress that moved like water when she turned. You came, she said when she saw me, to give this back. I held up the pass. I appreciate the thought, but I'm so glad you're here. She touched my arm briefly. I wasn't sure you'd... A silk scarf draped over my toolbox at the coat check caught her eye. Oh, she said, smiling for the first time since I'd met her. I must have dropped that earlier. Mrs. Klein appeared beside us like smoke, all bright teeth and concern. Ethan, dear, she said, employees aren't allowed at donor events. Madeline stepped closer to me. He's not an employee, he's my tech consultant for the auction tablets. Mrs. Klein's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, I see. Would you mind showing me how to reset them? Madeline asked me. In case they freeze during the bidding? We walked to a small kitchen behind the main gallery. She pulled out an iPad while I tried to think of a reason to leave. Touch here, I said, guiding her finger to the settings menu. Then general, then reset network settings. She was close enough that I could feel her breathing. When the tablet restarted, she laughed once, surprised at herself like she'd forgotten she could make that sound. I feel so stupid with technology, she said. You're not stupid. We stood there for a moment, the tablet forgotten between us. Through the doorway, I could hear the murmur of conversation, the clink of wine glasses. Let's get some air, she said. We walked outside to a bench facing the river, city lights reflected in the dark water like fallen stars. I haven't laughed in months, she said quietly. Not at home. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Sometimes silence was better than the wrong words. She pulled the silk scarf from her purse and draped it over her wrist. Graham travels constantly. When he's home, we're polite, like roommates who used to date. A boat passed on the river, its wake catching the moonlight. I should go, I said. Should you? The question hung between us like fog. She wasn't asking me to stay. She was asking if I wanted to. I don't know, I said honestly. We walked back toward the building in careful parallel lines, staying 3 paces apart. In the lobby, the elevator doors opened and Ava stepped out with earbuds around her neck. Graham's daughter, 17, dark hair like her stepmother, observant eyes that missed nothing. Hi, she said, glancing between us. Hi, sweetheart, Madeline said. How was Sarah's? Good. Ava's gaze lingered on the scarf in Madeline's hand. You're late. The event ran over. We rode the elevator in silence. Ava got off at 12. At 14, Madeline turned to me. Thank you for tonight, she said. Not for coming. For staying. Decent. Good night, Ms. Harrow. The porch light stayed on as I walked away. Later, alone in my studio, I texted Noah. Hinges squeak on 14B. He replied, on the list. Over the next 2 days, I fixed the hinges, then a blinking thermostat, then refilled printer ink that didn't really need refilling. Each visit was brief, documented in Noah's maintenance log, completely legitimate, and each time I left, the porch light would flick off for exactly 1 second before coming back on. Monday evening, I was returning a barcode scanner to the office when I heard Ava's key in the lock. Too early. I slipped into the laundry alcove, where the air was thick with detergent and the heat from running dryers. Through the thin wall, I heard voices. How was school? Madeline asked. Fine. Why is the maintenance guy here so much? The building's old. Things break. Footsteps passed the alcove. Ava paused just outside the doorway, and I held my breath until she moved on. That evening, Graham was home. I knocked on 14B to deliver the scanner, and he answered the door in an expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear. 1 second, he told whoever was on the line. To me, maintenance? Just returning equipment. He ended his call and pulled a crisp 50 from his wallet, leaving it on the kitchen counter. For the house call. My cheeks burned. I left the money where it was. Madeline watched our small theater from across the room, her expression unreadable. In the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. Small, tired, stubborn. Tuesday morning brought an email to all residents. Routine door camera audit this week. Thank you for your cooperation. I scrolled through my mental list of recent visits to 14B. Too many, too frequent, too suspicious for anyone actually looking. I spent the rest of Tuesday fixing real problems in other units. Wednesday, same thing. The porch light stayed on both nights, the signal for not alone, though we'd never discussed what that signal meant. Thursday morning, Noah knocked on my door. Harrow asked about you yesterday. What did she say? Asked if you were busy. Seemed disappointed when I said yes. I nodded and closed the door. Thursday afternoon, I walked to the gallery to return the artist pass officially. Madeline met me at the service entrance looking tired in the natural light. You've been avoiding me, she said. I've been working. She pulled an unsealed envelope from her purse. For your rent. I know it's been tight. The envelope was thick. More money than I made in 2 months. Please don't, I said, pushing it gently back toward her. She nodded, hurt and relieved at once. I should go, I said. As I turned to leave, Mrs. Klein appeared with her phone raised, ostensibly photographing an art installation. But I was clearly visible in the corner of her shot. Have a lovely evening, she called. Walking back to the building, Noah texted, Klein? Asked if you have a key to 14B. I replied, no, but I could already see how this would look to anyone reviewing security footage. The timestamps wouldn't lie, the frequency wouldn't make sense, and Mrs. Klein's photos would fill in the gaps. Friday evening, the power went out. I was in my studio when the lights died and the emergency generator kicked in. The whole building went dark except for battery-powered exit signs and the red glow of emergency lighting in the stairwells. I grabbed spare batteries and a portable router and headed upstairs. If anyone needed help with backup power, it would be the residents with home offices, people working late on important things. At 14B, the porch light was finally dark, first time in days. I knocked. Madeline opened the door holding a flashlight and looking calm but shaken. Behind her, The apartment glowed with battery-powered lanterns she'd placed on tables and counters. "The whole block's out," she said, "Transformer blue. I brought batteries and a backup router if you need to work." "I don't need to work." She stepped aside. "But come in, please." We sat on the floor beside the kitchen island, sharing the light from a single candle and my portable power bank. The silence was different without the constant hum of electronics. Rain drummed against the windows. Wax pooled slowly in the candle dish. "I kept inventing reasons," she said quietly. "Tasks, problems, things that needed fixing." She stared at the candle flame. "So I could feel safe near someone who actually noticed me." I set down my screwdriver and looked at her directly. "I stayed because your steadiness made my life less small." We kept our eyes on the candle, not on each other. Outside, rain hit the windows harder, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm was going off. The metal scrape of her house key on the counter was unnaturally loud. A quiet beat stretched between us. The candle flickered, casting our shadows long against the kitchen cabinets. Her shoulder was maybe 6 inches from mine. She moved first, just a slight lean in my direction. I turned toward her and touched my forehead to hers. Soft, still. Once. We both stepped back. The candle guttered in its dish, and we exhaled the same breath. Then, we were sitting apart again, the distance between us, careful and deliberate. 10 minutes later, the emergency lights flickered as the building systems came back online. Door cameras rebooted with soft electronic chirps. Red LEDs blinked to life in hallways and stairwells. We both understood what had just been recorded: timestamps, proximity, the fact that I was in her apartment during a power outage with no logged service request. Madeline adjusted the silk scarf that had been draped over a chair, smoothing it like armor. I stood and gathered my toolkit. "Call Noah if anything else breaks." "I will," she said. I walked home through steady rain, my boots splashing through puddles that reflected the building's restored lights. In my studio, I peeled off my damp shirt and tried not to think about the security footage that now existed somewhere in the building's digital memory. At midnight, an envelope slid under my door. Inside, a photo from the gallery event, me visible in the background while Mrs. Klein photographed an installation. Attached with a paperclip was a sticky note in her careful handwriting: "Best to keep boundaries." Below that, the same money Madeline had tried to give me at the gallery, now sealed in an unmarked envelope. I placed the cash back in the envelope, wrote "Not mine" on the front, and set it by my door for morning delivery. Saturday at 7:10 a.m., the lobby was quiet except for the rustle of newspaper plastic and the distant hum of coffee makers behind apartment doors. I left the envelope on 14B's doormat, knocked once, and walked to the elevator. The doors were almost closed when Ava slipped inside, holding the envelope. "Is this yours?" she asked. I shook my head. She studied me for a moment, then pressed the button for the lobby. "Mom and Dad fight about money sometimes," she said as we descended. "Dad thinks she spends too much on charity." The doors opened, and she walked out without looking back. Noah waved me over from the management office. "Audits today," he said quietly. "Keep your head down." I spent Saturday afternoon replacing exit signs and fixing a garbage disposal in 8A. Normal work, documented work, work that made sense. Through the office windows, I could see Mrs. Klein with the HOA committee, scrolling through footage on a laptop. Noah sat with his arms folded, occasionally shaking his head. I caught fragments of conversation: frequent visits, outage night, service logs. Noah's voice, firm: "Every visit logged, maintenance issues, that's my approval to give." An hour later, an email went out to all maintenance contractors. Effective immediately, all service visits must be requested through the building superintendent. No exceptions. No formal warning. No violations filed. Noah had protected me, but the message was clear. Sunday afternoon, I took a long walk around the river. Clear skies after the storm, joggers and dog walkers everywhere, life returning to normal. At dusk, I passed the building on my way home. 14 floors of lit windows, lives in boxes, people I'd never meet. I looked up at 14B, the porch light turned off for one unhurried beat, then back on. No text, no call, no envelope under my door. Just breath. I adjusted the silk scarf in my backpack, still there from the night I'd brought it home to return, and kept walking. 2 weeks passed. I fixed honest problems in other units, paid rent on time with money I'd earned replacing thermostats and updating router firmware for people who said, please and thank you, and handed me cash without making it feel like charity. I nodded at Madeline twice in the lobby when Ava was present. We talked about the weather, about a water pressure issue on 12, about nothing that mattered to anyone watching. No unlogged visits occurred, no envelopes appeared, no Mrs. Klein sightings with her phone camera ready. The porch light was mostly on, sometimes off for a beat, like punctuation in a conversation only we could read. On a Tuesday evening 2 weeks later, I was replacing batteries in the lobby mailboxes when I smelled citrus from the cleaning crew working upstairs. Someone was having their apartment deep cleaned, preparing for guests, maybe, or just maintaining the kind of perfection that required professional help. I finished with the mailboxes and stepped outside. The river was glass smooth, reflecting the lights of downtown like a mirror. Traffic hummed on the bridge a mile south. Above me, on the facade of the building, 14B's porch light clicked off. 1, 2, and back on. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't check my phone for texts that weren't there. I just stood in the cool air and let the code be what it was, a signal between two people who had learned the difference between wanting something and needing it. The scarf was still folded in my backpack, soft as a promise neither of us had spoken. Some nights I forgot it was there. Other nights I remembered and felt the weight of it against my shoulders. I walked toward the parking garage, past the entrance to my studio, past the spot where I'd stood that first night wondering what she meant when she said I deserved more than a tip. Now I knew. She hadn't meant money. She'd meant recognition. The simple acknowledgement that I was more than invisible, hands fixing invisible problems in a world that preferred not to notice people like me. And I was. For 47 minutes during a power outage, sitting on a kitchen floor by candlelight, I had been seen completely, not as the maintenance guy or the charity case or the young man who didn't belong in a place like this, just as myself. Some doors don't open. They just learn to breathe, light on, light off, and somehow that's enough for two people who never asked for more than they could safely hold. 3 months later, I still live above the parking garage. My rent is current. My toolkit is organized. Noah still sends me work orders, and residents still say thank you when I fix their problems. Mrs. Klein nods when she sees me in the lobby. No more comments about boundaries or HOA rules. I think she decided I learned my lesson. Ava graduated high school and left for college in August. Madeline helped her pack, and Graham flew back from a business trip to drive her to campus. Normal family things. I saw the moving truck from my window and didn't go outside until after they'd gone. The porch light still blinks sometimes, not every night. Not on any schedule I can predict, just often enough to remind me that some conversations don't need words and some connections don't need names. I've been on 3 dates since then, women my own age, who work at coffee shops or teach elementary school or sell insurance. Nice women with easy laughs and realistic expectations about men who live in studio apartments and fix routers for rent money. None of them last long enough to become complicated. Last week, Madeline hired me to set up a new computer system for the gallery, official work order, proper documentation, Noah's approval, 4 hours at union rates to transfer files and configure backup systems. We worked in professional silence while volunteers arranged flowers and cleaned display cases around us. When I finished, she walked me to the service entrance. Thank you, she said, exactly the way she'd say it to any contractor. You're welcome, I replied. But as I loaded my equipment into my truck, she appeared beside the passenger door with something in her hand, the silk scarf, folded small as a secret. I found this in my coat pocket, she said. I think it belongs to you now. She was gone before I could object. That night, I spread the scarf on my desk under the lamplight. It smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar, of gallery receptions and power outages and quiet moments when two people admitted they were lonelier than they'd planned to be. I folded it carefully and put it in my toolbox, between the wire strippers and electrical tape. Not hidden, just protected. Some nights, when I'm working late on a laptop repair or untangling cables, I see it there and remember what it felt like to be trusted with someone's careful secrets, to be chosen, briefly, over safety. The porch light is on tonight as I write this, steady and unremarkable, like any other light in any other building where people live their separate lives behind separate doors. But if it blinks twice before morning, I'll know she's thinking about winter coming, about storms that might knock out power, about candles and silence and the moment when two people stopped pretending they were strangers. And I'll think about it too, because some codes, once learned, become part of the language you speak with yourself in the dark. Light on means I'm not alone. Light off means I'm waiting. And the space between them, that's where everything true lives. In the pause between wanting and having, between safety and risk, between the person you are and the person you become when someone sees you completely and chooses not to look away. The scarf is in my toolbox. The light is on. And tomorrow I'll fix whatever breaks because that's what I do and that's enough. And sometimes enough is everything.